Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. The St. Louis Cardinals won the World Series, much to the delight of many Western Kentuckians. But for all the teams and all the fans that didn't make it, hope springs eternal in the Hot Stove League, which is underway. With me today to discuss the Hot Stove League, maybe stoke the stove a little bit, is our visiting professor of baseball. He is a scout for the Milwaukee Brewers, former scout for the New York Yankees, and is a native of McCracken County's baseballville, St. John's. Leon Wurth, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. It's been a while.
Detroit, destiny, they claw past the Yankees, they claw past the A's, they're expected to do the same, and lo and behold, the Birds, led by perhaps your least favorite manager, win the World Series. How did the Big Red do it?
Well, they did it by being really lucky. No, they...
We'll hear from the Cardinal fans on that one.
Well, the Cardinal fans, I told at the time, I was in Paducah for a short while, and it's funny how fans are, but they're the same everywhere. They were not very happy. Well, the Cardinals backed in, took the last day, and I said, baseball changes and teams get hot and cold, and you just don't know. I mean, it's really a great game because of all the variables. And I think the Cardinals have had much better teams the past 6 or 7 years, myself personally, and didn't win. But I think that's just baseball. And sometimes the best team doesn't always win, but the best team that week wins. And in sports in general, I think it's like that. That's why they play the game. And that's I think that's what happened. The Cardinals were a solid team, and they played well. But I think more so that it was a World Series for me that wasn't great because the Tigers played so bad. I mean, their pitchers couldn't make a throw, which you can go years without seeing that. But it's just amazing how many balls they threw away, and basically that kind of did them in. And they showed none of that. They played unbelievable in the playoffs, like you said, against the Yankees. I mean, they couldn't play any better. And that just happens sometimes in baseball. You got so many variables, and they played really bad.
Speaking of the playoffs, that had to be Kenny Rogers' greatest pitching performance going back to Little League. I mean, he looked like Sandy Koufax and Bob Gibson when they were unhittable. Was it the stuff on his hands?
No, that doesn't make you throw harder. I've never seen him throw that hard. He's a soft tosser in the mode of Glavine and Jamie Moyer and John Tudor guys that, I haven't seen him in a while, but 3 or 4 years ago, he's throwing mid-80s, low 80s. He was the gun. Now, the guns may be a little high on TV, but they had him 92 in the 7th inning, so they can't be that far off. Mm-hmm. And it looked like he was, and it looked like the Yankees were like, this is not the Kenny Rogers. It was like one of those. He was, there was no pine tar. He was. That was as good a performance as I've seen, and remember Bob Gibson in the World Series and Koufax when I was a kid, and there's been a lot of great playoff performances. But I think Leland and everybody else said the same thing. Torrey tipped his hat, and I think that turned the tide for the Tigers in that game. And I think that's kind of forgotten because they lost. But I've never seen anybody that was that focused, and every pitch was right where he wanted it to be. And, Glavine and those guys throw soft stuff, and, there's a different, but he was throwing power stuff, and unlike Kenny Rogers that I'd seen. And I don't think the Yankees had. So I think of the scouting reports, they're like, he's not supposed to be throwing this hard. So I don't know what was going on, but I think it was just a guy who had taken his lumps over the years and has had a couple of good years, and he's kind of had a revitalization. And it was just one of those remarkable things you see in sports.
Has your opinion of Tony La Russa changed?
Well, I can't remember what I said about Tony. He's a fine manager, and he's won a lot of games, and he's won World Series in both leagues. I think that you have to say that what they did, he and Duncan with their team, and what Jeff Weaver, who couldn't get anybody out.
Now that's another enigma with the Yankees. Terrible. How did they weave their magic over that guy too?
I don't know. I think everybody, the Angels were glad to get rid of him. His ERA was close to 7, I think, out there. And
I believe he lost one of the World Series games to the Marlins, didn't he, or figured into to a loss?
Yeah, he hasn't been. He's never lived up to his potential, and
Until now.
Until now. So you have to tip your hat to Tony La Russa and Dave Duncan and the Cardinals, because I think without him they don't win. And that's a great, Jocketty has done a great job picking up guys, and that's the whole secret in my business of scouting. Is it's like buying a stock when it's down, and obviously his stock was down, and for someone to say, if we get this guy, I think when our system, La Russa's, Dave Duncan's, whatever system, we can make this guy go. And maybe sometimes you just roll the dice and it happens, but got him a World Series. And therefore you have to take your hat off and say to the Cardinals and say, that's a great job.
That was as big a surprise to me, his performance on the mound, as Rogers was. I thought that's not the guy the Yankees got. Of course, the Yankees got him from Detroit, I believe, and had all this high hopes for him, and he never even came close. Now, this program is being taped in the early part of the Hot Stove League, so it may be dated later on, but as it stands now, are the Cardinals going to lose any of their World Series champion stars?
Well, I think Suppan and Weaver both made themselves a lot of money in the postseason. Suppan's always been a decent pitcher, but he also rose to the top and pitched incredibly well. He's always been a good pitcher, but his performance was outstanding. So both those guys made a lot of money. I would be surprised if, I know Pittsburgh, I think, has made some overtures toward him. I don't think he's signed at this point, has he? I can't keep up with all of them.
I think
so. I haven't read that anywhere. I know early I saw where the Pirates had made some type of offer toward him. Weaver, I don't know. Honestly, I've kept up with the winter meetings, and have kept in touch with Milwaukee and what we're doing. We had a few things in the works that didn't go, and I've read most of the papers, but I haven't read the St. Louis paper. But I haven't read any rumors about that. I know early, so I would be really shocked if they didn't try to bring Suppan back anyway. Now Weaver, I don't know. Maybe they thought, well, this guy's, maybe we got all out of him we can, and he's not going to be worth what we have to pay him because he doesn't have a track record. Now Suppan does, and Suppan's been there a while. I'd be a little shocked, but honestly, I don't know much about the Cardinals and what they're doing. They've been kind of quiet, other than there was a Barry Bonds rumor, and that's as of yesterday on this taping. He signed back with San Francisco. So I think they said it would be nice to have somebody behind Pujols, which it would be, but.
Well, now you've been traveling far and wide on behalf of the Milwaukee Brewers. Tell us about your travels.
Well, someone said that I haven't caught up, my body hadn't caught up with me yet. I've, in the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've been in Arizona, Venezuela for close to 3 weeks. And then we had 10 inches of snow in Milwaukee last week. So I went from tropical Venezuela to the snow that went, the ice storm through St. Louis that ended up just being, thankfully, just snow in Milwaukee. So 10 inches of snow. So, yeah, I've traveled a little bit. And
Scout's job is never done.
Never done, never done. So hopefully it's done for a couple months here. And I have a little downtime to spend with family and friends in Western Kentucky and enjoy the off season a little bit. But it's been pretty much go since spring training. And that's kind of the way the job goes. It's
now, how is your scouting for the Brewers different than when you were with the Yankees?
Well, basically with the Yankees, I did mostly amateur scouting. Now, I did a lot of postseason work and advanced work, which was a lot of pro scouting.
And earned you 4 World Series rings?
Right. Yes. Well, 3. I'm still waiting on 1.
Think you'll get
That's
it?
a different story. No, I've been promised a lot of things in life, and that's one I don't think I'm going to get. But anyway, what I do now, I didn't ever do spring training or anything with the Yankees. I was doing out in the South, doing high school, college. I don't see any high school or college games anymore, and people will ask me about a local player, and I just haven't seen a high school game in years. And so basically with Milwaukee, I go to spring training, and I'm in Florida for a month, which is great duty, and then I start seeing AA, AAA, and Major League Baseball games for trades and all that. So I'm a lot more involved in trades than with the Yankees as far as right now. So before high school, college, you're projecting. Right now, you know, if you screw up real quick, if you say, yeah, let's trade this guy for that guy, and it doesn't work out. So the returns are immediate, and you don't have to wait 5 or 6 years to see if you screwed up or not. You know pretty much right away. And it's really intense in the big league. You know, a lot of people think, oh, that's great, you're at a big league ballpark all the time. But, you know, if you see what a pitcher like Beckett and a lot of these guys, now it was Burnett last year that signed for millions, had a 59 and 58 record, and Ted Lilly, who's 59 and 58 career-wise, signs for $10 million for 4 years. A win in the big leagues, you understand, is extremely important for gate and for playoffs, and you're talking about a lot of money. So now when you're talking and your boss asks you for an evaluation of a player, and do we trade for this guy, it's not, yeah, let's take a chance and see. They expect, you know, it's a big deal, because now you realize that every win in the big leagues is worth a lot, and mostly talking about money as far as, you know, we won 75 games this year. The Cardinals won 83. You know, we were only, you know, they win the World Series. And we didn't have a really good year. We were disappointed. Last year we won 81 games. So, you know, you say, oh well, if we had a guy that gets us a couple more wins. So now when they start asking you about people, it's intense, and they expect you to know what's going on. So it's a job that's very, very involved, and it's players change, and so therefore every time you see a guy, you know, he may be a little different than what you saw before, and he may be coming up, and he may help your club. So it's pretty. So you pay attention when you work, and people think, well, you're at the ballpark watching a game, and it is a job, and you are working. It's fun and it's great.
Right.
But the evaluation process is ongoing, and it's and with the money that they're throwing around today, you know, you know, your job is there's some pressure and there's some intensity going on with it. So
What do you see the prospects for the Brew Crew next year?
well, I think in our division it's just like this year. We had, you know, we're not deep enough to, you know, Ben Sheets and Oka was probably our 1 and 3 pitchers, were missed a lot of the season with injuries. And you can, most every club could probably do that, because in 162 games you have injuries. We've retooled. We just made a trade to get a catcher, Johnny Estrada, which we felt like we needed a catcher of his ilk. We've strike out a little too much, and he makes contact and is close to a career 300 hitter. The young guys, you know, Ricky Weeks got hurt. We've still got the right side. We've got some young guys, J.J. Hardy. So our whole infield could have Billy Hall at third. So you got 4 guys on the infield that are in their early to mid-20s. So, and we think they're all got a high side, and they've already proven they can be productive big league ball players. And so our pitching is, you know, they stay healthy. We've got 2 or 3 really quality starters and decent bullpen. So, you know, I would say it all depends. If everything went right, we could be a playoff team. Are we as deep as the Yankees and a lot of teams that the problem is being able to go get somebody, either your minor league system or just go buy somebody like the Yankees do, if somebody doesn't have quite the year you expect them to have, or if you have injuries, and injuries are just part of it. And that's what hit us this year. We were disappointed, and we probably could have easily been 500 if we have our number 1 pitcher all year long. And you'd say, well, we had a chance, we might have been in the playoffs, because we were in a weak division. Now, I think that's another thing about the World Series was the American League dominated totally in all-star games and in interleague play. You would say the Cardinals were, you know, 10th, 11th, 12th best team, because they weren't even the best team in the National League as far as the season goes. But as you and I've talked about, the postseason is different. It's a whole new. It's different.
And as you've always said, the hottest team,
It's
and
the,
the Cardinals got hot.
it's the Cardinals got hot, and that's what happened. So the secret is getting there, and then hope your team, everybody's gelling at the right time, your pitching staff is healthy, and that's what happened to the Cardinals. And they've had years where they were the best team in baseball through August, and then they cooled down, and then they got beat the first round or something, and they're out. So
You go back to the series against the Red Sox. That surprised me. I really, it did me.
I thought they were. You know, you look at the team this year and that year, and you compare them for the whole year. You take the team of the Red Sox, what, 4 in a row, as if you're a baseball guy. But
Right.
again, that's some of the beauty of baseball.
It is. I agree.
Is the variables are such that it's hard to control, and as a scout, you take that into consideration, and you try to consider all the variables, and it's really a hard puzzle to put together. And again, with my job, you have to be able to work for. We don't. Yeah, somebody asked me, you get paid like the big league players? I said, yeah, I wish. But you have to want to. It's a tough puzzle to put together because the guys. You see a guy in April, and then you come back and see him in June, and you look at your report from April and go, wow, what was I looking at? I mean, they change, and but it's because of the variables of the game, and because it's an extremely long season, and you see guys with good first halves, good second halves, and somewhere in between. So it's extremely. Every year I do it, it's not boring. It becomes an extremely interesting game.
As a professional scout, evaluate the Red Sox pick of this Japanese pitcher who hasn't thrown a single ball in the major leagues. He throws what they call an astral ball or some funny name for it. They have spent a fortune on this guy. Would you have done that?
I don't know. I haven't seen him. I just saw him throw 3 or 4 pitches. I haven't. In Japan, I haven't seen the guy. I just saw him throw. Now, what I've read from sources is that most scouts say he's a number 1 or number 2. So I'm sure the Red Sox look, and a number 1 or number 2 pitcher in the big leagues is worth a lot of money. So from that standpoint, and seeing as how the Red Sox Nation wants to keep up with the Yankee Nation.
Is that part of it? The fact?
Oh, sure. That's in, same with the Mets, and the Yankees set the standard for the fans to let the management know with the Red Sox, Mets, we got to keep up, we got to win. And
of course, this guy may turn out to be the next Bob Gibson or Sandy Koufax, but I go back, and I know you do too, in your days of the Yankees had their own Hideki, a man named Irabu, who didn't really measure up to all the hype on him.
No, he didn't, and so I would think that I think this guy has a little bit better history of that, and I think since that time, I can't remember how much Irabu pitched over there, if he was a one-year wonder. This guy I think's done it for a while. So I think it's a little safer bet. Now whether or not he'll be a Schilling or Randy Johnson type guy, I don't know. But
and then the Yankees turn around and got their Japanese pitcher, who I think is more of a 3 or 4, maybe a 5th starter.
Right.
So are the Yankees trying to keep up with the Red Sox nation there? It's tit for tat between those two teams.
I don't know in that case that's true. I think the Yankees are trying to. I think the Yankees now with. I think that with Cashman now having more autonomy with the Yankees, and for those people that aren't well versed with the Yankees, I know you are. But last year, he got the control that most general managers usually have. Now with the Yankees, it's a different animal, and George would have. If he didn't like what Cashman said, we used to say with the Yankees, the flavor of the month. He's the flavor of the month, so George would go with him. And Cashman would say, if Bernie Williams wasn't doing well, and that was Cashman's guy, well, and Cashman, we don't listen to you this week, we'll listen to this guy or that guy. So what happened last year was that Brian was able to, he had several offers and his contract was up, which I don't know, to me, that was an extremely, I knew exactly what was going on, and at the time, Steinbrenner wanted to fire Torrey again because they got beat. and so he owed him a lot of money, and Cashman hadn't signed on as the general manager, and Matsui was a free agent. And the domino effect was, right after the playoffs, is that Matsui said, his agent said, well, Mr. Joe's good. I'd love to play for Mr. It would make a difference if Mr. Joe Torre was the manager. So that put a little pressure on the Yankees and Steinbrenner to not fire Torre, because if Torre goes, Matsui's like, well, I might go somewhere else. So at the time, Matsui fit really big, and they said, you know, we need this guy to be in our lineup. So, and then Mr. Torre says, it would really make a difference to me if Brian Cashman was the GM.
Ah.
So Brian Cashman's sitting in a very nice spot. So therefore, he not only got, his contract wasn't so much about the money, it was that he said, okay, if I'm going to be the general manager, then I want full power like most general managers have, and that's what he got. So therefore, you see the things the Yankees are doing now are not so, it was always a helter-skelter. No, but they were really not a direction they were going. And at least now, I think Cashman has a game plan, and this is what we're going to do, and we're not going to vary. And as you know, with the Yankees, they were prone to Steinbrenner's temperament and up and down, and they would get off the beaten path and say, oh, it's 2 weeks and this plan's not working, so let's dump that plan and push the panic button and go with another plan. And
I remember back after you were on the program after the 2001 World Series, and you said, here's a team that's 2 outs away from defending their World Series title. They lose, and basically Steinbrenner just panics. He starts spending tons of money buying these ball players, which hasn't netted the Yankees a World Series championship. Is Cashman taking him in a different direction? It seems to be they're these big money ball players. They're not going after Barry Zito great guns, and they may not get him. And last year with Johnny Damon, they got him, but sort of waiting and holding back. Do you see a different direction there?
well, yeah, I do. What I do see is, you know, they're with the Yankees, they would be afraid to go get a Jerry Bonderman or a good young arm. What the Yankees have is an aging staff. That's because that they would not go get, you know, they would get Randy Johnson or go after Curt Schilling when they are still good, but not the number 1 guy. They're number 2 or 3 guy now. So it was like a no-brainer. Well, let's get some guy that's proven. Where what they do need is they got Wang as their only really young.
And he's from their farm system, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was signed. He was signed from China, I think.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, he's up from the ranks. He's from the Yankee organization.
They didn't go. They just bought him from China,
Right.
not from the Orioles or somebody.
Right.
So yeah, he's a product, but he wasn't part of the draft. He was signed like like a Rabu or someone like that. But so I think what there was with Zito and these guys is that they're saying we're getting into the thing of getting guys on the downside of their career, and so we're doing the same thing every 2 or 3 years. They're pretty good in the season, but we need a dominant arm that's a younger pitcher that can go when. You know, they're breaking apart. You know, they're afraid Mussino break down or whatever. And Randy Johnson's back has got a surgery, and
he's what, 44 years old
yeah,
going on.
You know, so that they had a lot of age and guys there. So I'm not sure with Zito. You know, I'm not sure of his age, but he's been around a while, and his arm's been. So I think they're like, well, you locked this guy for 4 or 5 years, and now the last 2 or 3 years we're eating his contract, and we got a guy that's basically our number 4 or 5 starter, and we don't win World Series with number 4 or 5 starters. It's great. They'll win and get in the playoffs because Randy Johnson, these guys are still serviceable. But Randy Johnson is not the same Randy Johnson that beat him in the 2001 World Series.
Right.
So what they would do is say, well, this guy beat us, he's good, let's get him. Well, you know, they don't all stay 31 forever, you know, they get older. And so I think what Cashman is doing, he's probably, you know, they're looking to, what they need is an influx of younger quality pitchers.
And they evidently have tried that with Detroit with the Sheffield deal. They've got some young arms there.
Yep. Yeah, that guy's not a starter, I don't think, but he's a quality arm, and he's a power arm, and he's a young guy. So they are They
So
are.
there's sort of a youth movement on with the
Well,
Yankees.
you have to, some of those guys don't pan out, but when you do, then you look what the Tigers did with all their young pitchers.
Right.
And, that's what the Yankees need. They need to sustain, they need a Justin Verlander or Bonderman or someone like that. That's a guy in his 20s, they can say, hey, we got this guy. And now we've got a guy that, we don't have to worry about every year going out and getting the flavor of the month. Okay, what free agent do we have out here? That's on the downside of his career. Again, a guy that will get you to the playoffs and probably keep you up with Boston, but the Yankees are about winning, and to win, those guys by the end of the season, all the Yankee fans down on Randy Johnson, I think he won 18 games in 2005, and he gets knocked out against the Angels. He's awful. He's terrible. Well, he won 18 games, and he's still a pretty good pitcher. But I think that's what Cashman is probably. I think they're addressing. We need to stock the system up, just like with the Sheffield trade. We need to stock the system with some young arms here. You can always trade, and if you're a system that's got good quality arms, you deal from a position of power because you can go get hitters. Because everybody wants pitching because it's so needy. So if you're a system with good young quality arms, then your system you can use them, or if you want to barter and trade them for a hitter or somebody else, it's like gold in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
You got a lot of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the money. You can do what you want.
Before the program started, I asked you a question about George Steinbrenner. The Yankees are eliminated humiliatingly in the views of, undoubtedly, Mr. Steinbrenner. Rumors in the New York papers, Torrey's got 24 hours, 48 hours tops, he's gone, but he survives. And I asked you the question before the show, I'll ask you again, is there a kinder, gentler George Steinbrenner we're seeing?
No. No, he's got Brian Cashman, who said, you need to calm down. And Torrey's not the reason we're getting beat in the playoffs. And his accountant probably says, listen, George, I know you got a lot of money, but here's the deal. You owe this guy, 10 or 11 million? And if you go get Lou Piniella, you're going to have to pay him another, probably the same amount, 8, 9, 10. So now you got this much money involved in that. And are you really better off? Are you sure that's the answer?
Would Piniella have been a good fit with the Yankees?
He'd been okay. I think he's shown that he doesn't want a young group like he had with Tampa. He loses his patience. He's at the point in his career with managing. I don't think he's ever was the most patient guy in the world.
Apparently not.
Apparently not. And I wasn't surprised the Cubs have gone and got guys because I thought, well, this is going to be a disaster. The Cubs lost 90-some games. He was getting thrown out every other night in Tampa because they were getting beat. So he's not going to be a good fit for Chicago. So they have gone out and spent $270 million on Soriano and the Lilies and the likes to try to ensure a good club for him. He would have been, I don't know. It would have been the Steinbrenner-Piniella thing where Torrey is so good at Steinbrenner has made inferences, we're going to fire this guy or whatever, and Torrey just goes into hiding and doesn't answer. He's smart enough to not get involved in a verbal war, which I'm not sure Piniella, from that standpoint, if the Yankees did go bad and there was chirping from the office or the little private box up there that Piniella would just walk away and turn his back. He might have to say something, and then you really have some problems.
And it's almost like theater with Steinbrenner and Billy Martin, Steinbrenner and Piniella. That's all part of the big show.
Sure, and I think that's what Torrey and Cashman and Torrey understand Steinbrenner. They understand what they have to do and what it's like to be in New York and the Big Apple. They understand the pressures and they understand the arrows they're going to take from the media, from Steinbrenner if the Yankees don't win. And you have to have a special type of thing there, and you also have to understand that when it's all said and done that your pockets are going to be well lined and you're taken care of, and that's what we're doing here. And they understand that you have to be a big person to take it, to play in the Big Apple. You have to have a tough skin. If you do, you're going to be well compensated. And you say, okay, we work for George, he pays us well, and the media's, and we understand that, and you have to say, sometimes you just have to keep your mouth shut and do that. And Cashman knows exactly how to do that. He's been there a long time. He understands the game. He understands what's going on, and he keeps, and I think that he just said, hold it, let's, before we fire Torrey, let's take a look and make sure this is what we want to do, and what's our plan B. A lot of times, George didn't have plan B. Just, somebody's got to pay for us not winning the World Series. So, you know, Torrey's the easiest guy to fire, and Cashman might say, well, maybe Sheffield doesn't fit so well. Let's work on maybe retooling the team and having better guys for playoffs like we did in the 90s or whatever. Let's get some players. I'm not sure he said that. I'm guessing. You asked me. I don't have any inside information particularly on what's going on. But having been there and just understanding the players involved, I'm guessing that Cashman and Torrey work well with Steinbrenner because they lend a, let's not panic, baseball's a long season. The problem is that the playoffs aren't a long season. And yes, there's a lot of pressure to win. I don't know why the Yankees, you know, the Tigers played, as the Tigers played like they did against the Cardinals, the Yankees may be the World Series champions. Who knows?
And what
you know,
was
and the Tigers played outstanding.
And the Yankees rolled all over the Tigers in the regular season. Just rolled all over them, beat them repeatedly.
Yeah. So, you know, what do you say? I mean, you say we had a bad 5-game stretch, and all of a sudden Torrey's a great manager. Now he's an awful manager for 5 games. I mean, most people, no, they just go no. I mean, but yes, the Yankee fans are upset, and Steinbrenner's held responsible, so he wants to do something to show the fans that he's going to do something, and so there you go. So, you know, I mean, the guy, I've said it many times, you know, the guy pays his money, and he's got a right to do what he wants to do a lot of times. He's also got a right to pay attention to some smart people like Cashman and other guys that he pays money. And if they say, you know, George, maybe we shouldn't do this, maybe you should calm down and let's see, we're still going to be pretty good next year. And, you know, all you can do is kind of get there and the hot team wins. And that's just the way it is.
Going back to the 90s when the Yankees were winning, when 96, 98, 99, 2000, they won those World Series games with good ball players like Knobloch and Brocious and guys like that. And then they went out and bought the superstars like Giambi and Randy Johnson. Do you suppose that Steinbrenner has thought, you know, the formula that got us the World Series championships is not what I've been doing, and he has maybe perhaps thought he was wrong, or does he admit he's wrong?
You ask me this all the time about how he thinks, and I've told
he's
you,
a fascinating individual.
And I've told you that I don't. That's above my pay level to try to figure out.
What's your gut reaction, having worked with the Yankees so long?
I don't really think so. I don't know if he understands. I think chemistry's overrated a little bit. I was listening to a Cardinal call-in show the other night, and I know the Rams fans, I hate to get off on football, but it's an interesting analogy. And the radio guy, most fans will say, bad chemistry. They don't like each other. And the guy on the radio had my response, which is that really doesn't play into the professional level. Basically, it's execution and level of talent. And you know, there's been a lot of teams that you'd say, you know, old A's or whatever. And you know, there's the chemistry on the field. You know, if the pitcher throws really well, and if Weaver goes out and throws a great game, the Cardinals win, and they did. And you know, whether he gets along with Scott Rowland or whoever else, or Tony La Russa, and Rowland don't get along, and that's the case of execution. And if you have guys that perform, and I'm surprised you haven't asked me about A-Rod.
I was getting ready to. There again, that's the chemistry thing. Now, I was in New York last summer, saw 4 games. Unfortunately, the Yankees lost 3 out of 4. The fans were vicious in attacking A-Rod. I mean, there were signs. I mean, this guy was, he was virtually Saddam Hussein. And then the stories began to surface. There was bad chemistry between A-Rod and Derek Jeter. What about that? I
don't know. You know, I've read the same things, obviously. And then, but the latest, which I also wanted to ask you about, was Derek Jeter not winning the MVP. And some rumors of writers saying that he didn't coddle A-Rod, and as an MVP, he should have. Now, all I know, and I thought back to Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, and I thought, well, I wonder if Lou Gehrig would have needed coddled because Babe Ruth was getting all the attention. And I'm not saying that A-Rod needs it, or
Right.
A-Rod has
I
even
know.
said that
I
he
know.
wants it.
Right.
I mean, this guy's the best player in baseball when he came to the Yankees, and for people to say Jeter needs to go coddle him blows my mind. As a guy that's in the business, I'm like, this is the best player in baseball needs Jeter to come over and hold his hand. It just blows me away. I'm like, you're kidding. It's an insult to. Now A-Rod's gone through hell up there, and I mean, you're right. And you were there. I haven't been there. I just know what I read, and I know that the fans are all over. The poor guy is being beaten unmercifully. And, it's an interesting thing. I think that obviously you watch him swing and he's not the same swing. Obviously he's trying too hard. And you see a guy that I'm sure when he came to the Yankees, you would be like any professional that's the best guy in your sport. You're like Tiger Woods. I mean, your moments of doubt are, if there are any, they're few and far between. Well, obviously there's been doubts creeping in A-Rod's mind. You'd have to admit it and look and say his performance, he wants so bad for the people of New York to love him, and they love Jeter. And I don't know if it's anything A-Rod does, it's just the way the fans are, for whatever reason. And then Jeter comes out the first game and gets 5 hits, and he says he's a playoff guy, and you're like, well, maybe that's, sometimes it's luck, sometimes, some guys maybe play a little bit better, but you figure A-Rod, the guy had 121 RBIs this year.
I was about to say, his numbers are not shabby.
Not shabby. Now, they're down from last year, but I believe it was the American League MVP last year, right?
Relatively down, right.
So here you are booing the American League MVP, which something about what the Yankee fans expect or whatever. So it's really a weird situation up there, I guess. From what I haven't been up there to see it. I just read like.
Well, yeah, of course, in reading in the newspapers, and of course, getting back to the thing with Jeter and the MVP, there was also complaints that there's an anti-New York bias. These Midwestern sports writers don't like him because they're the Yankees. And the Yankees, of course, as you know from your experience with the Yankees, they excite strong passions. Either you love them or you hate them.
Right.
You can't be in between with the Yankees.
Yeah, I thought that it's interesting that a guy like David Ortiz, who put up first base numbers last year, but couldn't get it. Now, I did check on Morneau. I didn't follow the Twins that much, but I did check on Morneau. He's a nice, really good player, and I think he did start. He didn't DH, but maybe 2 or 3 games. So he played first base, because I wanted to do a little homework on that, because I got an interesting discussion with some people about it. But from what I know, and I didn't cover the American League, so I really didn't see it. My coverage was more the Braves and Marlins and the National League. But I thought that Joe Mauer was the most valuable player for the Twins. The catcher who was hitting close to 400 for most of the year.
Some of the sports writers said the same thing.
And that shocked me that Morneau was, I would think that most of the people in Minnesota would say that they thought Joe Mauer was the MVP of the team. And we come to positions. Now, Jeter played shortstop, and Joe Mauer was a catcher, which is, now, when you compare catching stats in the American League or in the baseball and look at Joe Mauer, what he did compared to the rest of the catchers in baseball. Now, and you take Morneau, a first baseman, and look and say, oh, he had a nice year. He had 124, 34 RBIs, whatever. But compare him to the other first basemen, and it's not that. So, and then you take Jeter as a shortstop, bat second and score 130 whatever and hit 343, probably came very close to leading the league in hitting, and play the kind of defense that a shortstop plays. To me, we get back to the Moneyball thing where we only consider offensive stats and you don't consider the position. So, in my mind, and I really don't have a dog in the hunt, I think, I like the Twins for what they do, and I like Morneau and Mauer, and I think Jeter's a great player. I'm really shocked that Jeter didn't win the MVP. The guy had an unbelievable year, and he plays unbelievable defense for the Yankees. So I was a little shocked. If Joe Mauer got it, I probably wouldn't have raised my eyebrows that much, because he's a catcher and he hit close to 350. Well, catchers just don't do that. And he's a pretty good defensive catcher, so Jeter and he bring at the two toughest defensive positions, and one hit 343 and one hit 347. it's hard for me to see how you give it to, or no, that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
But and again, then I started reading where sports writers were saying, well, Jeter lost votes because of the A-Rod thing, which just blew me away. I thought that's Jeter's responsibility to take care of A-Rod. The touchy-feely world we're getting in is starting to bother me a little bit.
This really started to surface about mid-season, maybe toward the tail of the season. The sports writers were pointing out that Giambi had put his arm around him, Messina had, everybody but the captain hadn't. And it was this implication, or just flat statement, that the captain was supposed to do this, and he didn't. And you got to think, if you're some sports writer in Chicago or Des Moines or someplace, that is because it's like the Heisman Trophy in football. It is so subjective. It's incredibly subjective. And so these little variables come in there, and in the end, Jeter loses it.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I guess it was fairly close, but it wasn't quite.
It was fairly close. Yeah.
But anyway, that's. And a lot of Cardinal fans were. I said I can't have a problem with the Phillies won more games, 3 more games than the Cardinals, and guy hits 58 home runs. Pujols is. I mean, I couldn't argue if Pujols got it, but certainly Ryan Howard has 58 home runs. Can't argue with him being the MVP of the National League. I don't have. I have more of a problem with the American League. If you were asking me about who really won, there's no skin off my teeth either way. I'm just. I mean, shortstop hits 343 and hits 97 RBIs from the number 2 slot and plays the kind of defense he plays and brings what he brings to the Yankees. And there is intangibles. There's no question. Jeter has always done things for the Yankees that he makes the plays when they need to be made. He makes clutch plays when they need to be made. He gets
throwing out Giambi at home and
I mean, he does, and he did those things this year too.
Right.
He doesn't change. I mean, he's the glue that holds the team together. Now, how to say he's not valuable, hitting 347, and all the intangibles that we know he brings. But an old Yankee hater pointed out that in 1942 that Joe Gordon won the MVP over Ted Williams when Ted Williams won the MVP. And I went back and looked up the numbers, and they were Williams had incredibly better numbers. So he's saying, well, the Yankees are getting their just desserts because back then the New York papers dominated because the East Coast back in the 40s and 50s, the West Coast was there wasn't any teams out there.
Right.
So New York absolutely dominated, the writers dominated, and I guess he was just saying, well, now they're just getting paid back. So I was like, okay.
In our previous conversations, you've always said what a good baseball town St. Louis is and what good fans they are. Compare and contrast the St. Louis fans to the New York fans.
St. Louis fans are more forgiving, more understanding. They understand how things go, and New York fans want it now. They want it, and therefore, Steinbrenner's a really good fit because what have you done for me lately? And I think
I wonder how far back that goes. Of course, the Yankees have 26 World Championships, but were the Yankee fans back in the 50s and 40s the way they are now? I wonder about that.
I don't know, but the Cardinals won the most World Series for the second most World
Absolutely.
Series and the most of any National League team. So their fans would say, "Well, we've got a right to." And
that's right.
Not that I haven't heard that the Cardinal fans aren't very discerning and wanting, but I think that they're Midwestern. Well, I'll say this: I've scouted in Des Moines and Omaha, Cincinnati, St. Louis, and it's just, to me, and I get to travel a lot. And I've told you where I've been. Venezuela's an extremely interesting place. Mostly it was a good trip. I really wanted to smoke a cigar with Hugo, but
maybe next time.
Maybe next time.
Yeah.
But there's just the Midwestern people, Oklahoma and all that. I've scouted all those areas. It's just a different atmosphere and attitude. I think people, they are just more forgiving and not so discerning people. And St. Louis fits in that crowd. Even Chicago, Milwaukee, in that area, not that fans don't want to win, but they're just different than New York fans. It's just a different world, and I think that the Midwestern fans are just more down-to-earth people. I don't know how to say. I don't know if it's the farming roots or whatever, but they're very passionate about it. But they understand it's not life and death. And New York, Boston, it's almost more like life and death. People, their whole lives maybe revolve around that a little bit. And I don't know, the Midwestern folks, now where they're passionate, I just think they're able to see things, and I think they appreciate where they might understand an era more so, the Cardinal fans, than maybe a Yankee fan would. They don't really care about that. They want the end result. Where I think the Cardinal fans really appreciate baseball. I think they love baseball. They love their Cardinals, but I think Midwestern people, they love baseball. So if the other team plays well, they can get enjoyment out of, Sosa was a really good player from the Cubs. They said, I got to see Sosa play or something like that, maybe. Or Yankee fans, it's Boston. They've got to win. If it doesn't win, we got a problem.
I remember a story in the World Series. It was either it might have been '96. Anyway, it was playing the Braves, and a poor Braves fan foolishly took a seat in the bleachers, and they removed his hat and set it on fire in front of him. And I'm thinking, well, that's hardcore stuff. And again, I was shocked at the vicious comments. I mean, it was like he was Saddam Hussein, and he's trying as hard as he can. He's obviously pressing, and it got to be ridiculous. The poor man would go out, and he would be someplace, and they would say, well, he should be, I don't know what he should be doing rather than take his family out. There was an incident where he was over in Central Park with his family, and he shouldn't have been there. He should have been, what should he have been doing, taking batting practice? I don't know. But it's this just, and it seems to be much more intense in New York than anywhere else, maybe Boston, secondly.
Maybe Boston.
So to play in New York, you've got to be a special kind of player.
You do. You have to be. If you have any weaknesses, and I think Giambi and A-Rod, you look at them before they came there, but every little weakness is exposed, and they have to. And what happens is these guys have to look themselves in the mirror, I guess, or they get put in. It's like a pressure putt they've never had to make in the Ryder Cup, and they've never had to do it. They've been great golfers. Just to make that, because I play a little golf. And I think they get put in a situation where they've never been in baseball. It's pressure that they've never felt. Didn't think they would feel, and they've been successful, all-stars, the whole deal. And to me, all of a sudden they get put under the bright lights, and a lot of guys don't get the scrutiny that they've got, but when you get $20 million a year or whatever they make, then the fans feel like they've got a right, and maybe they should. And so when they say, now A-Rod, I think everybody does. I just think his has been unmerciful.
Oh, it has.
For whatever reason, he just strikes the New York people wrong. New York people are, I don't know if they can see through people. I can't see it. I don't know. A-Rod seems to be, he's a nice looking guy. Jeter's a nice looking guy. What's the difference? I don't, maybe the New York fans can tell you. I can't tell you what the difference is. Other than maybe Jeter had just a little more success to start with, or they thought A-Rod's an outsider, and maybe he came in, maybe they thought he had an attitude of something. I don't really know.
But of course, but then A-Rod graciously moves to third base.
Yeah.
This is Jeter's team. He stays where he is.
Sure.
He's done everything he could to defer to Jeter.
I think
it seems.
Clemens did that his first year when he came over. He was, an old Yankee hater. Jeter, I remember, said, well, I'm glad he's with us. I'm getting tired of getting hit in the back. Because Clemens used to love to plunk with the Red Sox and with Toronto. He did hit them. He didn't. But when he tried too hard, because I remember that was a problem his first year when he came over, and finally by the World Series in his second year, he felt like he was a Yankee because he was trying for that acceptance. And A-Rod and those guys, they understand that when you come into the Yankees, here you got your little clubhouse, and you still got the guys from the '90s and their group. I do think there's a split between the guys that are left over from the '90s and the new.
I think there is to agree.
The Mussinas, Giambis, those guys are still, and by the fans. And Cashman referenced to this morning about bringing Pettit back, and he referenced it I was reading, I don't know if it's the Daily News or whatever, but he referenced bringing Pettit back. Well, there's still, it's hard to say this, but your daddy's Yankees from the 90s that used to win, and you didn't have all these high-priced guys. So the fans understand that. And you ask if Steinbrenner understands that, I can't answer that. I don't know. But O'Neill's, you know, like you said, and I've said this many, many times, Martinez, O'Neill, they brought a certain playoff. They weren't great during the season, but for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah.
And you look at Jeter, and he plays well in the playoffs, and now he understands that we have to turn it up a notch, and they concentrate harder, whatever they do. And that's exactly what the teams of the 90s did. They had veteran guys, and I still say, that's when Gene Michael and Cashman, they ran the show, and they didn't go out, and they didn't do a knee-jerk reaction and go, well, here's the best player, here's Randy Johnson, here's Giambi, here's all these guys, let's just throw money at them, get them, and we'll win. And as we've seen, a lot of teams that don't, they just look at the last few World Series, and the teams with the most money haven't been winning. So, you know, look at the Marlins this year. What a great story they were. $15 million, and they could have made the playoffs easily. So, you know, teams are going, oh, you know, I mean, maybe it depends on the parts we bring in, not just go throw the money out. So I still don't want to give too much to chemistry, but there are certain ball players, maybe not chemistry, but there are certain, I've told you before, there are guys that are 162 regular season players, and then there's guys that are playoff players. And the big difference being, over 162 games, a guy can put up great numbers and you can be deceived. But if you look at the numbers and say, well, he got most of his home runs off the worst pitchers on that staff, well, you don't face that in the playoffs. You face the best teams, and you face only their 1, 2, and 3 starters. You don't get a chance to beat up on number 4 and 5 for Tampa Bay and Kansas City when you're in the playoffs, which a lot of guys do, put up good numbers. Guys go sign them, and you say, well, he doesn't do that well against really you want. And what O'Neill and Martinez and Brosius and those guys did was battled the 1, 2 pitchers on the other team. They knew they were professional hitters, and they didn't put up great numbers, but they were very good batters versus the top pitchers in the league. At least they didn't get a hit. At least they wore them out and got them out of the game by the 6th inning and got to the bullpen. That was the type of ball players you got. So when you build a team to win to get in the playoffs, which most teams try to do, but when you're with the Yankees, you look for players that can win the World Series. And I think that was the genius, and Gene Michael was the guy who orchestrated every one of those trades because he scouted O'Neill and those guys and said, this guy is the guy we need. And that's what you do. And now I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction. Well, we'll just get every best player in baseball in here and we'll win, and the Yankees haven't done it, which to me makes me grin a little bit and smile, because as a coach and as a scout that says, well, it's a no-brainer to go get all those guys and just pay them more than anybody else and bring them in, and they haven't won a World Series because of it. So it lends a little to the thing of baseball, and there still is something about, well, there's some scouting, let's get this guy, will fit good, and actually do a little brain work other than just going throwing money at it.
One of the sports writers in analyzing the Yankees said that whereas in the 90s, they were a team in the truest sense of the word, now you had these individual superstars. One writer said that Randy Johnson was about as cuddly as a prickly pear cactus. You've got this superstar here, and then you've got Giambi over here, and they're not, you had said before what a leader Tino Martinez was. These guys were a team, they were a unit, they socialized together, they did things together. And this sports writer, a New York sports writer, said that you don't see that anymore, that these are individual superstars. And he even mentioned A-Rod. Whereas in the old days, you had the good ball players like O'Neill and Martinez and Brosius and Knobloch and guys like that.
I think now, 5 years after 2001, the last World Series they were in, which they easily could have won that World Series. You know, and that's when the purge started, as I thought. That's when Brosius retired, I think, and Tino went, and they decided to go with Giambi, and the whole thing started with, and I think there's a book out called
There is.
After the 2001, and I haven't read it. I'd like to read it.
I haven't either, but there is, and it is
the day the dynasty died.
Exactly, and it's exactly what you said on this program. That, and I remember saying you told me that Steinbrenner had already, when the Yankees went up 2-1, he already went down to plan the victory celebration.
That's right.
The ancient Greeks call that hubris, excessive pride, and the good book says pride goes before a fall. And but he's a fascinating individual, and of course it remains to be seen. What about Johnny Damon? Good pickup for the Yankees.
Good pickup. Good pickup. He provides what they wanted.
Bobby Abreu, good pickup.
Abreu, yes, Abreu is a good pickup. He does so many things. It's amazing. It's another good conversation. But since he won the home run hitting contest, you know, he doesn't hit home runs anymore. He only hit 15 this year. And Abreu was one. When I saw him with the Phillies in early 2000, was as good an all-around outfielder as I've ever seen. And he's still a very good ball player. He, you know, his production was down a little bit home run wise, but he's still a great on-base guy. He walks a lot. He's in the tradition. He's a guy with the Yankees that I would get because he does a lot of different things for them, and he's still a good outfielder. He brings more than just that. I like Abreu. I thought Damon was a little bit of an overpay, but maybe after you look at the salaries this year, maybe it's.
And he put up some good numbers for the Yankees this year.
Yeah, he put up good numbers. So he's you know, he's probably worth what they're paying him, and good. I mean, you know, he's got some limitations defensively. I mean, when you go and you look up offensively, you say yes. You look at the type of guy that you need probably to win the playoffs. I would say he's fine. He's fine for that, and paid him a lot of money. There was some talk about getting him instead of Giambi with the Yankees in 2001, which a lot of us thought we needed a leadoff hitter, and at the time Damon would have cost 7 or 8 probably, and Giambi cost 17, and we were thinking, well, we take that 10 million and get another pitcher or something, and we need a leadoff guy, which the Yankees never had a leadoff guy, and I thought same thing, they got him too late. I mean, it's the same old thing, you know. I think Randy Johnson, well, yeah, it's good to get him, but he's not the same guy. And I think still back to Cashman, I think what now is that I think the scouts and everybody won't be afraid to say, okay, this is a good young player, and we're going to get him. And Steinbrenner can't fire you because of this, because Cashman says, okay, I'm going to approve this, and this is what I'm going to do. We need to build up, like the Sheffield for Sanchez, Jay, with the Tigers. He's a 23-year-old guy that throws 98, 99 like a lot of those guys do. Okay, we're going to start getting these guys back in the system, because what we got is a bunch of old guys that are going to be gone, and then our system's bare, and what do we got? We're left chasing free agents every year and throwing in new pieces in the pot here, and we realize now that doesn't work, just like you said. You don't know how this guy's going to fit. Sheffield can't find a better hitter than he, but was he a fit? Did he fit in? No, he was always griping, whatever. Well, that's not the Yankee way. And Jeter doesn't like that, I guarantee you. Posada, all those guys from the Oakland, they never griped. Tino, they were team players. They were like a special group. They said, we're the Yankees. You're expected to act this way, do this. We're not about individuals. And like you said, now you got a bunch of individuals. Not that Giambi and A-Rod, but still, they may have their own little thing, and, you know, it's about me and this and that. And now if they go out in the field and perform, but now when they don't perform, now we got a problem. That's the problem. Nobody cares, you know, if Giambi and I don't know if they do or not, if they've got their own little private section.
I have a problem. We're out of time.
Okay.
Promise to come back and see us again.
I'll promise.
Barry Craig, thanks for joining us. Our guest was Leon Wurth, and we hope to have him back maybe before spring and ball starts again. Join us next time. Thanks.